My wife destroyed me in divorce court with fake gambling evidence. Then I found my dead mother's secret safe. Inside was $847,000 and a letter saying, "Your wife has been working with the people who killed your father." I called the FBI and discovered that everything I thought I knew about my life was a carefully constructed lie designed to protect me from the mob. 3 months ago, I was Fletcher Castellano, living what everyone would call the American dream in a $4.2 million house in Pasadena with my wife Cordelia and our 2 kids, Quinlan and Brenna. I was a commercial insurance adjuster, the kind of guy who spent his days evaluating other people's disasters and helping them rebuild. My specialty was high-value commercial claims, which meant I regularly handled cases worth millions and had developed a network of forensic accountants, private investigators, and attorneys who trusted my analytical approach to complex financial situations. What I didn't know was that my expertise in uncovering insurance fraud and my methodical approach to documentation would become the exact skills I'd need to save my own life. The destruction of my marriage started 18 months ago with small changes I initially dismissed as midlife stress. Cordelia would step outside to take phone calls, claiming new real estate clients demanded privacy. She'd come home later each night, talking about bigger deals and more demanding customers. The warmth we'd shared for nearly 2 decades began cooling degree by degree until I felt like I was living with someone who barely tolerated my presence. My kids noticed it too. Quinlan, our 16-year-old basketball star, who'd inherited his grandfather's height and athletic ability, would ask why Mom seemed angry all the time. Brenna, 14, and an incredibly talented artist, started spending more time in her room, creating darker drawings of families that looked broken even when they were smiling. I tried everything I could think of to reconnect with Cordelia. Date nights, weekend getaways, couples counseling sessions she'd attend, but remain distant during. Nothing worked. If anything, my efforts seemed to make her more hostile, more calculating in ways that reminded me of the insurance claimants I'd investigated who were hiding something significant. Then came the divorce papers, and with them, a full-scale attack on everything I thought I knew about myself. According to Cordelia's attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Voss, who specialized in high-asset divorces, I was a compulsive gambler who'd been hiding massive debts from my family. They painted me as financially reckless, emotionally unstable, and certainly unfit to have custody of our children. They had bank statements showing transactions I'd never made, casino receipts bearing my signature from places I'd never visited, and witness statements from people claiming I'd borrowed money and never repaid them. None of it was true. I'd bought maybe 5 lottery tickets in my entire life, never set foot in a casino, never even played poker with friends. My insurance practice was built on trust and reliability, with every client account meticulously maintained and every penny accounted for. But somehow they had documentation for all of their allegations. My own attorney, Robert Hawkins, who I'd used for business contracts over the years, kept shaking his head as we reviewed the evidence. "Fletcher, I have to ask, is any of this real? Because if you've been hiding gambling debts, I need to know now so we can work on damage control." "Rob, I swear on my children's lives, I have never gambled anything more than a church raffle ticket. Someone is setting me up, and I don't understand how or why." But the evidence kept mounting. Witness statements from people claiming I'd borrowed money and never paid them back. A coworker from my office swearing he'd seen me placing bets on my phone during lunch breaks. Even my neighbor Jerry, who I'd had beers with dozens of times, signed an affidavit claiming he'd watched me become increasingly erratic and desperate over the past year. The courtroom proceedings were a nightmare. I sat there watching my entire life get dismantled by lawyers who spoke about me like I was some kind of criminal. My own wife, the mother of my children, the woman I'd shared a bed with for 18 years, wouldn't even look at me. When Judge Patricia Winters awarded Cordelia everything, the house, primary custody, even my business assets, I felt something break inside my chest. But the worst part came afterward, outside the courthouse. Cordelia walked up to me with a smile I'd never seen before, cold and satisfied. She leaned in close and whispered, "You'll never see Quinlan and Brenna again. I'm moving them to Portland next month, and you don't have the money to fight me anymore." That's when I knew this wasn't just a marriage falling apart. This was something calculated and cruel that I couldn't understand. Within 6 weeks, I'd lost my house, my kids, and even my insurance license because of fabricated financial misconduct allegations. I had nowhere to go except back to Ohio, to my mother's house that had been sitting empty since she died 2 years ago. So I loaded what was left of my life into my Honda Civic and drove 1,200 miles to a place I hadn't lived since I was 18. My mother's house on Maple Street in Akron looked exactly as it had at her funeral. Small, neat, the kind of 1960s ranch home that defined middle-class America back when that actually meant something. White siding, black shutters, a front porch just big enough for 2 chairs, and the small table where my mother used to sit every evening, with her tea and whatever book she was reading from the library. Winifred Castellano had been the most quietly strong person I'd ever known. She'd raised me alone after my father supposedly died in a car accident when I was 12, never remarrying, never even dating as far as I could tell. Every morning she'd make me breakfast and pack my lunch, then walk 6 blocks to her job at the downtown branch of the Akron Public Library. Every evening she'd come home with a stack of books under her arm, some for work, some for pleasure, some because she thought I might like them. What I'd always found strange was how we seemed to have just enough money. Never plenty, but never the desperate shortage you'd expect from a single mother's librarian salary. When I needed school clothes, there was money for school clothes. When the car broke down, she had it fixed. When I wanted to go to college, she somehow made that happen too, though she never explained exactly how she'd managed to save enough. I'd asked her about it once when I was in my 20s. Newly married to Cordelia, and starting to understand how expensive life could be. Mom, how did you do it? How did you manage to give me everything I needed on what the library paid you? She'd just smiled that quiet smile of hers and said, "You find a way when someone you love depends on you. That's what parents do." Now, after weeks of depression and feeling sorry for myself, I realized that if I was going to have any chance of getting my children back, I needed money. The only asset I had left was this house, free and clear, a gift from a woman who'd spent her entire adult life making sure I had something solid to stand on. I threw myself into renovation work with desperate energy. I stripped wallpaper, sanded floors, painted every room. Working with my hands felt good after months of sitting in lawyers' offices feeling helpless. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted was a small act of fighting back against the people who had tried to destroy me. The basement was the last area I tackled. Mom had used it mainly for storage, and it was packed with decades of accumulated belongings. Going through her things was emotional, but oddly comforting. It reminded me of who I really was, where I'd come from, and the woman who'd raised me to be honest, hardworking, and decent. That's when I noticed something strange about the furnace area. The concrete floor around the old gas furnace looked different from the rest of the basement. There were scratch marks that looked recent, and dust had settled in patterns that didn't make sense. It looked like the furnace had been moved recently, which was impossible. Mom had been dead for 2 years, and before that, she'd been too frail to move anything heavier than a book. I spent the better part of an afternoon figuring out how to move that furnace. I had to disconnect the gas line, which terrified me, and use a furniture dolly with considerable leverage to shift it about 3 feet from the wall. My back was screaming by the time I managed it, but it was worth it. Behind the furnace, set into the concrete wall at about shoulder height, was a small safe I'd never known existed. It was one of those old-fashioned combination safes, maybe 18 inches square, painted the same gray as the basement wall so it would blend in. The metal was worn smooth in places, like it had been opened many times over many years. I stared at that safe for 20 minutes, my mind racing. The combination lock had numbers from 0 to 99, meaning 10,000 possible combinations. But as I stood there, something my mother used to do came back to me. Every year on my birthday, March 15th, she'd call me at exactly in the morning. Not, but on the dot. She'd always said it was because that was the exact time I was born, and she wanted to celebrate the precise moment I came into the world. March 15th, 1977. 03:15:77. My hands were shaking as I turned the dial. Right to 03, left to 15, right to 77. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard a soft click and the heavy door swung open. What I found inside changed everything I thought I knew about my life. The safe was deeper than it appeared from the outside and packed full. The first thing I saw was money, more cash than I'd ever seen in one place. Stacks of $100 bills bound with rubber bands, some old and yellowed, others crisp and new. My hands trembled as I pulled them out, counting as I went. $847,000, to be exact. Beneath the money were documents that made my blood freeze. Multiple driver's licenses, all with my mother's photograph, but different names. Isabella Reyes from New Mexico, Maria Santos from Arizona, Catherine Walsh from Nevada. The photos showed my mother at different ages, but it was definitely her. Younger versions of the quiet librarian who'd raised me, but with something harder in her eyes. Something watchful that I'd never noticed when she was alive. There were social security cards to match the licenses, birth certificates, even a passport for Isabella Reyes dated 1988. All of them looked completely authentic, not like forgeries, but like official government documents. My mother, Winifred Castellano, had apparently been living under multiple identities for decades. At the very bottom of the safe was a sealed envelope with my name written on it in my mother's careful handwriting. I sat down hard on the basement floor and tore it open. Inside were 3 pages of my mother's handwriting, and the first line made my blood freeze. My dearest Fletcher, if you're reading this, they finally found you, and I'm no longer here to protect you. The letter went on to destroy everything I'd believed about my life. Your real name is Fletcher Castellano. Your father didn't die in a car accident when you were 12. His name was Vincent Castellano, and he was murdered by the Torino crime family in Chicago on September 18, 1989. I witnessed his murder because I was supposed to die with him. Instead, I ran. I took you, and I ran. 3 months later, I testified against the men who killed your father in front of a federal grand jury. We entered the witness protection program in January 1990. I became Winifred Morrison. You became Fletcher Morrison. We moved to Akron, Ohio to start over. The government gave us new identities, a modest settlement to help us establish our new lives, and the promise that we'd be safe as long as we never contacted anyone from our old life or revealed who we really were. But, Fletcher, there's something else you need to know. Something I discovered too late to warn you properly. I hired private investigators to watch you in California starting 3 years ago. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I'd heard rumors that people were asking questions about the Castellano family again. What they discovered broke my heart. Your wife, Cordelia, has been working with people who've been looking for us for decades. They found you first, and they used her to get close to you. I don't know if she understood what she was really involved in, or if they manipulated her the same way they tried to manipulate you. But the divorce proceedings, the false evidence about gambling, all of it was designed to break you financially and emotionally, so you'd have nowhere to go except back to Ohio. They wanted to force you to come here, to the one place where they knew I might have left something that could lead them to other witnesses or evidence from the original case. Everything suddenly made sense. The way my mother had always seemed to have just enough money despite her librarian salary, her reluctance to talk about our life before Ohio, the way she'd taught me never to trust strangers too quickly, never to reveal too much personal information, always to be aware of my surroundings. I'd thought she was just being protective. She'd been keeping us alive. The letter continued. There's a phone number at the bottom of this page. Call Marshal Theodore Vance with the U.S. Marshals Service. He's been waiting for this call since the day I died. Tell him you're Vincent Castellano's son, and tell him you're ready to finish what we started. I sat on that basement floor for an hour, staring at the letter and trying to process what it meant. My whole life had been a lie, but not the kind that diminishes you, the kind that protects you until you're strong enough to handle the truth. Then I picked up my phone and dialed Marshal Theodore Vance. Marshal Theodore Vance answered on the second ring, like he'd been sitting by his phone waiting for 35 years. Vance? Marshal Vance, this is Fletcher Morrison, but I think my real name is Fletcher Castellano. There was a long pause, then a deep breath. Son, I've been waiting for this call since your mother died. Where are you right now? I'm in my mother's house in Akron, sitting next to an open safe that she left for me. Don't touch anything else. Don't talk to anyone. And don't leave that house. I'll be there in 4 hours. Marshal Vance turned out to be a tall, gray-haired man in his early 60s who looked like he'd seen every kind of human evil imaginable and never quite gotten used to it. He arrived with 2 other federal agents and spent 6 hours going through everything my mother had left behind, photographing documents, cataloging evidence, and asking me questions about my life in California. "Your mother was one of the bravest people I ever worked with," he told me as we sat at her kitchen table around midnight. She knew they had eventually tracked down her son, so she prepared for this day. The money, the safe combination using your birthday, even hiring those private investigators to watch you in California. She wanted you to find all of this when you needed it most. The full scope of what had happened to me was even worse than I'd imagined. The Torino crime family had been systematically hunting down witnesses from my father's murder trial for decades. But they'd gotten smarter about it. Instead of just killing people, which brought too much federal attention, they'd learned to destroy lives more subtly. They'd find ways to compromise the people closest to their targets, then use those people to create chaos and financial ruin. "They've been working on your case for at least 5 years, Marshal Vance explained. They found Cordelia through her real estate connections, people who knew the right kind of criminals. They probably approached her as potential customers first, legitimate business that slowly turned into something else. The investigators my mother had hired had been building their own case during this time, documenting everything. They had recordings of Cordelia meeting with people connected to the Torino organization. They had evidence of money changing hands, falsified documents being created, witnesses being paid to lie about me. The gambling addiction story, the fake bank statements, all of it was their work. We've had surveillance on this neighborhood for 2 years, Marshal Vance admitted. We knew if they forced you to come back here, they'd eventually make their move. We've been documenting everyone who showed unusual interest in this address. The most shocking revelation came the next morning. Cordelia had been arrested at her Portland hotel at 6 a.m., along with 3 men who'd been following her. She'd been cooperating with people she thought were private investigators, helping her secure a better divorce settlement. She had no idea they were connected to organized crime until federal agents explained it to her in an interview room. "She's agreed to testify," Marshal Vance told me over coffee. "Turns out she's as much a victim in this as you are. They convinced her you were hiding gambling debts and other women. They showed her fake evidence, got her scared and angry, then offered to help her protect the kids and secure her financial future. The hardest phone call I ever made was to Quinlan and Brina. They were staying with Cordelia's sister in Portland, confused and scared, because their mother had been arrested and no one would tell them why." "Dad?" Quinlan's voice sounded small and young, nothing like the confident teenager I remembered. "Hey buddy, I know this is all really confusing right now, but I need you to know that everything's going to be okay. Your mom and I both love you very much, and none of what's happened is anybody's fault." "Are you really a gambling addict?" Brina asked when she got on the phone. "Mom said you stole money, and that's why we had to move." "No, sweetheart. I never gambled, and I never stole anything. Some very bad people lied about me to hurt our family, but the police caught them. We're going to be together again very soon. It took 6 months to untangle everything legally. The evidence my mother's investigators had gathered, combined with Cordelia's testimony and the federal case against the Torino organization, was enough to clear my name completely. The fake gambling records were exposed as forgeries. The witnesses who'd lied about me recanted their statements. My insurance license was reinstated with an official apology from the state board. The Torino case went to trial 8 months later. I testified just like my mother had all those years ago, but this time, I wouldn't be running afterward. This time, we finished what she started. 5 members of the crime family received sentences ranging from 25 years to life. The judge specifically noted that their systematic campaign to destroy witness families represented a new level of organized crime sophistication that demanded the harshest possible penalties. Cordelia and I will never get back what we had. Too much damage was done. Too many lies were told. Too much trust was broken. But we're working together now to help our kids understand what happened and why. She's in therapy, dealing with the guilt of having been manipulated into destroying her own family. I'm in therapy learning how to trust people again. The house in Ohio sold for enough money to buy a smaller place in California and fund college accounts for both kids. Combined with my mother's careful savings, I had the financial resources to restart my insurance practice and provide the stability my children needed. Quinlan's back on the basketball team, and his coach says several colleges are still interested despite the disruption to his junior year. Brina's art has gotten more hopeful lately, more colorful, though she still draws pictures of families that look like they've survived storms. I think about my mother every day. about the sacrifice she made to give me a normal childhood, about the courage it took to testify against murderers and then spend 35 years looking over her shoulder. She saved my life twice, once when I was 12 and again when I was 47, and I never got the chance to thank her for either one. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads you exactly where you need to be. My mother knew that, and she made sure that even from beyond the grave, she could still protect her son. The woman who destroyed my marriage thinking she was securing her future had actually led me to discover my true identity and the strength I'd inherited from people who don't back down from fights, even when the odds are stacked against them.